John McGinn hit by a spear. In April 2015, St Mirren midfielder John McGinn, just 20 at the time, became the victim of one of football's most bizarre training ground incidents. During a session, McGinn stole the ball from captain Stephen Thompson, and Thompson, in what he describes as a daft prank, picked up one of these. A training pole. If you've ever played football before, you'll probably recognise them. We're told as kids not to throw them at each other for the obvious reason that they have a massive spike on the end. Unfortunately, nobody told Stephen Thompson this, because he threw a spiked training pole straight into John McGinn's thigh. The result? Severe bleeding, a gaping wound, and McGinn missing the next few Premiership matches. Thompson later admitted he was mortified and insisted it wasn't out of anger, just a foolish prank. He even offered McGinn his win bonus to make up for it. Thompson wasn't new to weird injuries himself. In fact, he once detached a nerve slicing an apple, and another time underwent groin surgery after falling off a banana boat. Clearly, misfortune had a habit of following him. For McGinn though, he left St Mirren in the summer of 2015, joined Hibs, then on to Aston Villa, where he became one of Scotland's best midfielders. But if that training pole had gone 2 centimetres deeper, his career might have been over. Paul McGowan's electronic tag. In the opening weekend of the 2018-19 Scottish Premiership, Dundee midfielder Paul McGowan turned heads. Not with his footwork or passing, but with a visible court-ordered electronic tag strapped to his ankle as he played against St Mirren. The strange sight was a result of a court ruling earlier that summer. McGowan had been spared prison after spitting on a nightclub bouncer during a drunken incident following Dundee's awards night in May. He'd narrowly avoided jail, and instead he was ordered to wear an electronic tag for 2 months, perform 200 hours of community service, pay £200 compensation, and observe a weekend curfew. The worst part was this wasn't the first time he'd been tagged. In 2015, he had to wear an electronic tag for 16 weeks after he assaulted a police officer, which resulted in him being unable to play any evening games as he was on house arrest between 7 and 7. Throughout his legal issues, Dundee employed Paul McGowan for 9 seasons. He played over 300 games for the club, despite the fact his curfew quite often stopped him playing from evening games. Martin Waghorn's chip shop fight. Back when he was leading the line for Rangers, striker Martin Waghorn found himself in one of Scottish football's most ridiculous off-pitch sagas, and it all started outside a chip shop. Waghorn had just picked up his food from a chip shop when a teenage boy from nearby St Ninian's High School shouted abuse at him from across the road, calling him shite. Now most players would ignore it, but not Waghorn. He stormed down Fenwick Road, takeaway in hand, and told the kid, "Come and say it to my face then." And to be fair, he did. With his mates watching and a sandwich in hand, he doubled down, calling Waghorn shite again, right to his face. The whole thing was caught on video and it quickly spread, not because of the insult, but because of how surreal the scene looked. A Ranger striker confronting a teenager outside a Glasgow chippy while the boy calmly ate his lunch. For Waghorn, who was Rangers' top scorer the previous season, it was an unwanted headline. But for the kid, bragging rights at school forever. Ian Black, the betting scandal. In 2013, Rangers midfielder Ian Black was hit with one of the most infamous bans in Scottish football history, after being caught betting on matches, including games involving his own team. The SFA accused Black of betting against his then registered clubs on 3 occasions, placing bets on 10 matches involving them directly, and on a further 147 matches worldwide. In total, 160 bets over 7 years. The punishments were heavy: a 10-game ban, 7 of them suspended, plus a $7,500 fine. But the headline that stuck was simple: Ian Black had literally bet against Rangers while playing for them. The most surreal example came in 2013 when Rangers beat East Stirlingshire 4-2. Black himself had scored in the game, bursting his own accumulator in the process. He later admitted he'd slapped £5 on 3 draws in a rush, accidentally included his own match, and then ruined his own bet by scoring the 3rd goal. To his credit, Black did apologise to his teammates and supporters, but for many, the damage was already done. Here was a midfielder who'd won the Scottish Cup with Hearts, joined Rangers, and ended up being remembered not for his football, but for gambling. A player who once worked part-time as a painter and decorator to cover late wages at Hearts, now sabotaging his own wagers with goals at Ibrox. From Inverness to Hearts to Rangers, Ian Black's career had plenty of highs and lows, but nothing quite compared to the scandal that left him banned, fined, and forever remembered as the man who quite literally bet against himself. Lee Griffiths kicks a flare. In September 2021, striker Lee Griffiths was on loan at Dundee from Celtic. And during a League Cup match against St Johnston, Griffiths ran nearly 40 yards and booted a smoking flare straight into the away end. The device flew into a group of 1,800 Saints supporters and even struck one fan. Luckily, no injuries, but plenty of outrage, and of course, plenty of phones filming the moment. Griffiths later said he only meant to clear the flare off the pitch to get the game restarted, but the courts saw it differently. He admitted acting in a reckless manner, apologised, and ended up with fines from every direction. £15,000 from Celtic, £1,000 from Dundee, and another £1,000 from Dundee Sheriff Court. In total, £17,000. By the time of his court appearance, Griffiths was 33 and playing for Mandurah City in Australia for free. He even admitted the case could affect whether he'd be allowed to keep working down under. The court accepted he hadn't done it out of malice, but the image of Griffiths leathering a flare into rival fans will go down as one of the wildest "what was he thinking" moments in Scottish football. Luckily for him, he was able to return to Australia, where he's still playing today. Hamilton Academical £1 million scam. Back in 2017, Hamilton Academical were left red-faced after falling victim to what has to be one of the most embarrassing frauds in Scottish football history. Almost £1 million, basically all the money the club had, vanished in just 2 days after staff were tricked by scammers posing to be Royal Bank of Scotland's fraud team. It's what's called a vishing scam. The fraudsters phoned up, convinced the Accies employee that the club's funds were under threat, and persuaded them to move the cash into so-called safe accounts. In reality, those accounts belong to criminals. Over 20 separate transactions went out, with sums like $655,000 leaving in 1 day. RBS's system even flagged suspicious payments, but the Accies employee was persuaded to override the warnings. Chief Executive Colin McGowan later admitted, "You wouldn't need to be Sherlock Holmes to see something was wrong here." The fallout was brutal. Over £800,000 never came back. Players had to be sold on the cheap, and money was taken from the club's youth academy just to keep the lights on. The Accies even tried to sue Royal Bank of Scotland, claiming the bank should share half the blame. But the truth is, the scam only worked because their internal checks were so weak. For a club with crowds of around 2,500, it was nearly fatal. The £1 million scam left Accies as the punchline to one of Scottish football's most costly blunders. Let's just hope they don't run into a Nigerian prince anytime soon. If you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing, it massively helps out, and if you're feeling extra generous, why not hit like on the video as well. Back to it. The Cinch sponsorship saga. In 2021, the SPFL proudly announced a new shiny league sponsor, Cinch, the online car dealer. The problem? Rangers already had a sponsorship deal with Parks of Hamilton, owned by none other than Douglas Park, their chairman. So while every other club plastered Cinch branding across shirts, stadiums and interview backdrops, Rangers flat out refused. No logos, no adverts, nothing. The SPFL were furious. They said the deal was league-wide. Rangers said it breached their existing contract, and the whole thing spiralled into court cases, arbitration, and years of bad blood. Finally, in 2023, the SPFL admitted defeat. They accepted Rangers did have a pre-existing contract, apologised for the mess, and even agreed to pay Rangers legal costs, money that ended up going to charity. The saga was so embarrassing that the SPFL had to commission an independent review of their own governance, just to prove they could handle sponsorships properly. Only in Scottish football could a sponsorship deal meant to make the league look professional instead turn into a years-long PR disaster about who gets to advertise cars. Derek Riordan's nightclub ban. Derek Riordan came through at Hibs as Edinburgh's golden boy. On the pitch, a great striker, but off it, he was banned from every nightclub in the city. Back in 2008, Riordan was slapped with a year-long ban under the Unite scheme after clashing with door staff at Berlin nightclub. But instead of lying low, he was soon spotted trying to sneak into a club called Espionage, which doubled his punishment to 2 years ban from every nightclub in Edinburgh. Now, you'd think that would have been the end of it, but Riordan being Riordan, he kept testing the boundaries. One night, his Hibs teammates Rob Jones, Dean Shields, Lewis Stevenson and Philip Murray tried to smuggle him into nightclub Lulu by surrounding him in a huddle. The plan failed instantly. As one witness put it, his daft haircut gave him away straight away. The bouncer spotted him, told the whole squad they weren't getting in, and the players shuffled off without a fight. To be fair, this time Riordan didn't kick off. Police confirmed he was polite, no abuse, and crucially, no breach of peace, which meant his 2-year ban wasn't extended any further. Still, it summed up his career perfectly. Good on the pitch, chaos off it. From nightclub scraps, court cases, and even a later trial for alleged hate speech, Riordan's football career ended up being overshadowed by his off-pitch reputation. In fact, he even had to go at running a pub after his career. Inverness Cali Thistles, Twitter mistake. Inverness Caledonian Thistle don't usually make headlines out of Scotland, but in 2017 they went viral worldwide for all the wrong reasons. Late one July evening, fans scrolling through the club's official Twitter noticed something unusual in the likes tab. Alongside match highlights and player interviews, the club had liked a post from an adult website that was, let's just say, not very football related. Now, it doesn't take a genius to work out what happened. Someone running the socials obviously meant to switch back to their personal account, but instead liked it from the official Inverness page, broadcasting it to nearly 25,000 followers. The like was quickly deleted, but this is the internet. Screenshots were everywhere within minutes. Fans were joking that Inverness Caledonian Thistle had finally discovered a new attacking formation. The board of course went into full crisis mode. They locked down the account, called in the authorities, and released a very serious statement promising a formal investigation into entirely inappropriate activity. Former Cali defender Josh Meekins even saw the funny side, posting a cheeky reaction online, and for most fans, it was taken in good humour. Just another reminder that in Scottish football, even a quiet club from the Highlands can make global headlines without kicking a ball. Jimmy Johnston lost at sea. In May 1974, just weeks before the World Cup in West Germany, Scotland's training camp in Largs produced one of the strangest off-field stories in football history, when Celtic legend Jimmy Johnston, aka Jinky, had to be rescued from the sea. After a 2-0 win over Wales at Hampden, manager Willie Ormond gave his players permission to enjoy a night out, but he said, "Don't go mental." Now, at around 5 AM on their way back to the team hotel, Johnston and a few teammates, including Rangers' Sandy Jordan, Hibs' Eric Shadler, and Chelsea's Davy Hay, spotted a rowing boat on the shore. Jinky, always the joker, climbed in, but what started as a laugh quickly turned into chaos when Sandy Jordan jokingly pushed the boat out further, only for the tide to catch it. Suddenly, Scotland's star winger was being swept out to sea, and the boat didn't even have oars. Panic set in as the players realised they couldn't bring him back, and the Coast Guard had to be called. Eventually, Johnston was rescued and brought safely to dry land, but the headlines the next morning were not very forgiving. Scotland's World Cup prep was being overshadowed by their best player almost drifting off to Ireland before a ball had even been kicked. But fans quickly forgave Jinky, especially just a few days later when he starred in Scotland's 2-0 win over England at Hampden. What could have been a disaster for Scotland is now remembered as one of football's funniest moments. The night Jimmy Johnston, one of the greatest wingers the game has ever seen, was nearly lost at sea.